All right, so welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are really excited about the opportunity we're going to present to you all today in partnership with Together We Remember. My name is Katerina Rodriguez, and I am, for those of you that don't know me, I'm the Director of Pre-K through 12 Education Programs at ADL. And this webinar was intended for our No Place for Hate schools who are going to be taking advantage of the opportunity that David, the founder of Together We Remember, will be describing in a little bit. But for those of you who aren't familiar, really quick, No Place for Hate is our equity school climate improvement framework where we work together and partner with schools. It's a year-long process and it continues year to year to help schools really engage student-led climate change in their schools. And it's centered around active learning, discussion, listening, and activities that are done on campus that impacts the entire student population. So if you want to learn more about that, please feel free to go onto our website, adl.org, and read a little bit about No Place for Hate. But the reason we're here today is because ADL Education has partnered with Together We Remember to offer an optional activity to our No Place for Hate schools or middle and high schools, where you will be able to take part in this campaign in April, and I'll let David dive into that a little bit more. But in order to really impart into your students the importance of remembering and how to translate that remembrance into action on the ground. So with that being said, I'm going to turn it now over to David to take it away. David, it's all you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kat, and thank you so much to ADL for offering this opportunity to partner together. This is honestly a dream come true. So without further ado, I would love to dive in. So as Kat mentioned, my name is David Estrin. I'm the founder and CEO of Together We Remember, and Together We Remember is a nonprofit and emerging movement dedicated to empowering the next generation of leaders to make never again a reality. And so today on our webinar, we've got one key goal, and that's to inspire and prepare you to lead a Together Remember Vigil in your community in April 2019. And so we're going to do a couple of things together. First, I'm really proud to share Together Remember's founding story, how we came to be. Second, we're going to go through how to actually plan a Together Remember Vigil in your community. Third, we'll go through some examples of Together Remember Vigils to help spark your imagination. And we have Jeannie Massey, who's a teacher in Maryland, who's worked with us before, who's going to talk about her experience at Goretti High School. And finally, we'll create some space for any questions that y'all have. So we will dive right in. So starting with our story. And our story really starts with my family's story. All four of my grandparents survived the Holocaust, and in very different ways. On my dad's side, my grandparents were Jewish resistance fighters in Lithuania and survived for 3 years that way. The very large baby on the left there, that's yours truly when I was little. And on the right, my grandparents on my mom's side, my grandma was saved by Raoul Wallenberg, the Swedish diplomat who saved thousands of Jews from getting on the trains that ultimately would go to Auschwitz. And then my grandfather on my mom's side survived the Auschwitz and Mauthausen death camps. So there were a lot of those stories from as far back as I can remember as far as my upbringing goes. And now when we fast forward and I got a little bit older, it was around my bar mitzvah time that I thought I was real hot stuff. Things were going really well. But it was just a few months later that I found myself inside the gates of my grandfather's concentration camp for the very first time in Mauthausen. And that day was really the first day that I was self-aware of feeling empathy for another human being. And it just so happened it was my grandfather. And really throughout my teens, I call it an awakening because I was brought back to the camps more than once. So in 2005, my grandpa brought me back to meet the liberators from the American army that actually freed the camp, like the Band of Brothers guys, which was incredible. And then several years later, I went on the March of the Living with thousands of other young Jewish kids from around the world. And I learned that I had to share my grandpa with many other kids because he was a grandpa to many, no doubt. And I learned that his stories had universal appeal, honestly, all throughout my childhood to kids from all different races and religions and backgrounds. And so, you know, I really believed in the power of collective memory to spark collective awareness and action. Unfortunately, in 2012, when I was a junior at Duke University, my grandpa passed away at the age of 86. He joked that at the time he was 66 because he considered his liberation his rebirth day. So he had a really beautiful and blessed life. And as we went through some of his things, we actually found he left us multiple binders of our family's documents from that era, from the Holocaust. And this is one of the documents that we found, and it really caught my attention. This is a list of different prisoners from Auschwitz and Mauthausen. And as you can tell, there are the numbers associated with all of the different individuals, their handwritten names, and many lines drawn through it. One of those is my great-grandfather, who was killed in front of my grandfather in Mauthausen, and the line is drawn through. And then but another one of those folks on that list is my grandfather. He was Jew number 67245. And when I saw this list, it really almost stopped my heart, because I thought, like, what would it have taken for us to be one of those folks who didn't make it? And of all the names on this list, there's only a few that actually came away unscathed. So, I wondered how many more names exist on lists like this from the past? How many more names are being added to lists like this today around the world? And how many more names will exist on lists like this in the future? So this is sort of like the beginning of the spark of where Together Remember came from. And so back when I was a student, I wondered, how could I honor my grandpa's memory in a way that would be relevant, meaningful, and most importantly, actionable to my school community and to future generations? Now, at the time, Israel and Gaza were at war, and so Jewish and Muslim relations on Duke's campus were quite tense. Fortunately, I was really close friends with the Muslim chaplain on campus, Imam Abdullah Antepli, and he asked if I had any ideas to bring the community together. And I said, well, I've got one crazy idea. What if on Holocaust Remembrance Day, for which there was no programming going on, what if we organize a remembrance vigil in the most central, high-traffic, public part of the campus, but instead of reading names of victims just from the Holocaust, what if we read names of victims from different genocides all throughout history? So when we say never again, we clearly mean it for all people on planet Earth, and then allow that to bring people together. So that's what we did. And for the first year at Duke, we did a 10-hour vigil. And in the second year, we did a 24-hour vigil all throughout the night, bringing together students and community members and survivors and faculty from all different identity groups. And it really was magic on the campus. And it also created space for so many other types of programs within those events. For example, survivor testimonies, scholarly lectures, dialogues, pledges, museum exhibitions, prayers, art projects, musical performances, and what has now evolved into a variety of other really interesting and compelling projects and opportunities. So from this program at Duke, this is where the seed for Together Remember was born. We thought, what if we could organize remembrance vigils like this all over the world at the same time during the same month in April, which is Genocide Awareness and Prevention Month, and then share those experiences live on social media to show how people are transforming remembrance into action all over the world in their own way. Now, of course, I graduated at some point, and my parents said I had to get a real job. So I did, and I actually did land my dream job, where I had the chance to give away a really large company's money through corporate philanthropy projects. But I had that voice in the back of my head that told me that really my purpose on planet Earth was to go after Together Remember's global vision. And like you, I'm sure, I started noticing some trends going on that were really alarming in the world. Of course, first, the rise of hate, both offline and online, deepening violent conflicts in places like Syria, ongoing atrocities and genocides in places like Myanmar, and the worst refugee crisis in history with over 68 million people displaced. So I ultimately decided to quit my job and pursue that life purpose to transform remembrance into action to make never again a reality. And I'm really proud to share that just a few months ago was our 1-year anniversary for our nonprofit actually existing. And in that first year of officially existing, we organized our largest Together Remember Vigil campaign around the world in April. And we had over 40 communities in 8 different countries that organized vigils. And I'm talking about in faith communities, in museums, in high schools, and universities, any community-based space, we were trying to make a vigil happen there. And we really demonstrated the potential of our global movement. And you can see some of these photos from some of our events around the world. So everywhere from the Congo to Cambodia to France, the United States, Canada, and that list is expanding by the day, which is incredibly exciting. Now, that said, it's really exciting, but there are a lot of challenges that are emerging. For example, this is the ADL heat map, which shows hatred, extremism, anti-Semitism, and terrorism incidents and other cases in the past year. And as you can tell, there are cases in almost every, if not all states in our country. So when I saw this map, I thought of a quote from Elie Wiesel, the famous author and Holocaust survivor, in which he said, "Wherever men and women are persecuted because of their race, religion, or political views, that place must, at that moment, become the center of the universe." So now let's look back at this map. The thing that comes to my mind is, how do we fight hate and violence if it seems like it's in all of our communities? How do all of our communities become the center of the universe? And so that's what I think the beauty of Together We Remember is that we can fight fire with fire, except not the kind of fire that divides and destroys communities, but the kinds that burns bright and unites our communities as one. So we want to spark that Together We Remember flame in cities all across the country and all around the world, and hopefully with your help. And we often take strength and courage from one of our core values, which is this, that in the darkest moments, the brightest beacons of humanity always shine through. There are folks like the Wallenbergs who make my existence possible, but there are thousands of other folks who have the courage to save lives, many of whom we'll never know. And I would wager to say that all of us in our family tree owe our lives to. And so this is that opportunity where I get to invite y'all into the Together We Remember movement to spark a Together We Remember flame in your community. And that involves, a project-based learning experience with your students and your community members in which you ask 2 questions. What is the meaning of never again to your community? Because the meaning of never again, whether it's here where I am in Baltimore or in Eastern Congo, is quite different, though it can be globally united. And second, how do you actually make it a reality? How do we bring together the necessary stakeholders at the local level on up to really make the systemic change possible? And I'm also wanting to note that we're not alone. There are all these incredible organizations that we're bringing together from around the world that have expertise in prevention, in response, and in reconciliation. Organizations like the ADL, which is absolutely incredible to have on board, and at the same time, an organization like Twitter. So they're actually our first funder, giving us over $100,000 in free advertising to ensure that we can tell the story of the Together Remember campaign, of the vigils that y'all organize in your schools and communities. So it's quite likely that come April, a lot of folks are going to know about Together We Remember that didn't know about it before. And what is this all for? The vision is a 30-year vision. By 2048, genocide and mass atrocities and identity-based violence will be a thing of the past. It will be history. And 2048 is significant because that's the 100-year anniversary of the Genocide Convention, as well as the UN Declaration of Human Rights. And this isn't a movement that sparks and comes and goes. What does it mean to do this work generation after generation for 30 years? A lot more can be possible when we design projects in that sort of way. So that's chapter 1. I hope y'all feel a little bit inspired. I definitely feel it. So now I want to move on to chapter 2, which is how to actually plan your Vigil program. The most important thing to know about the components of a Together We Remember Vigil is it's entirely up to you. Your community is your canvas. What you paint on it is up to you. Now that said, we've learned a variety of different components that when brought together make for a really successful experience. And those are the following. 1, a space to gather, right? So you can reserve a classroom or a central space in your community to host an event. 2, interactive programming, kind of modeling off of what we did at Duke, potentially a name reading ceremony, stories from survivors, artistic experiences, exhibitions, or some combination of those depending on how much time you have to invest in the project. A call to action, right? So we're transforming remembrance into action. This is where that comes in. You could sign a petition to engage elected officials. There's a variety of options, and we're here to help you figure out what's the right thing for your community. And finally, social media. So we want to tell that story. We want to reframe the narrative, not to allow folks who really want silence or violence, but to replace that with uniting our voices as one on social media. So you can use our Together Remember hashtag and share your community's experience live in real time. And those photos and videos will live on in our virtual memorial, the only one of its kind to capture what we're doing as a movement. And so now what's the Together Remember Vigil planning process? At a high level, right now is the perfect timing, right? We're getting connected in the month of December. Once you sign up on the Together We Remember website, we'll share all of our toolkit resources with you and then start a relationship where we can help figure out what's going to be the best kind of vigil in your community. In January, we highly recommend building a team. Now, in some cases, you might just as a teacher say, I'm just going to do a one-day project. I don't really need to involve many members in my school community. That's totally okay. We know teachers are really overextended as is. But that said, you could also invite your students to take the lead on this project, right? And to lead the way. We've seen that happen really effectively in other communities. And in that case, you would want to serve as sort of a champion for your students and encourage your students to build a team in their community. Then in the months of February and March, designing the actual event. It doesn't really cost much money, anywhere from literally $0 to it could be upwards of $1,000 depending on how complex your event is. But of course you would want a budget if you're gonna end up spending some money. And then of course promoting the event if you're doing something that involves, you know, a good number of folks. And then in the month of April, all of us spark our flames and we get our vigils going all around the world. And then May we'll follow up and learn and ask sort of what went well, what new opportunities are there in terms of how we can improve our resources and the way we work together. And then also ask, you know, what can we do to keep the energy going beyond May and into the next school year? So now let's go into some of the resources that are available. This is the product of over 7 years of working all around the world. Number one, I want to call your attention to the classroom vigil lesson plan, right? So if you're one of those teachers that just has one period to allocate or several periods, but just, you know, 60 minutes to 90 minutes, this will be probably your best go-to resource. It has step-by-step instructions for what you can do in terms of which resources here to leverage in an event. And that has worked quite well in some schools. I'll go into that in a little bit. But we also have our campaign website, a 4-minute intro video, a name reading app that sources from over 180,000 names of victims from 14 different atrocities that are in our unique database. And you simply tap the screen and names will pop up one after the other. We also have our virtual memorial, which I referenced earlier. We have an organizer's guide, which has literally guidance on every step of the way related to the timeline. If you're a real big planner and you like checklists, we've got a planning toolkit and a bunch of templates for you. I certainly am wired that way. But also in the past, we got feedback from students and teachers that said, it's really important that we commemorate those who died, but we really want to know how they lived. We want to know who they were, who were the folks behind the names. And so we created these survivor and protector profiles, which are the stories of a variety of folks from those different atrocities. We also have conflict summaries because folks were reading names and hearing about Argentina and Guatemala and other countries around the world, like, I didn't know something happened there. How many years ago? Tell me about that. And so we created conflict summaries as well. We also have the pledge template, which is a wonderful tool to invite your students to sort of say who, what, and why they remember themselves. Great for photos for social media as well. And then on the far right, we have a variety of ADL education resources, which we're so grateful to incorporate into our toolkit this year. Some of which I remember from way back when I had a No Place for Hate school, or started a chapter when I was in high school in Florida. But there's something called the Escalation of Hate lesson plan, and it really helps. I recommend it because it helps ground your students in a stronger understanding of key terms and how how stereotypes and bias can ultimately lead step by step to the worst of the worst, which is genocide. So your students will learn the definitions behind discrimination, genocide, hate crimes, and learn about examples to associate it and better recognize it when it happens. I also wanted to amplify the voice of students themselves. So it's not just me speaking here, but you could hear straight from some of our students. So this is one of the quotes that I really loved, and it's from a student in Illinois. And she said, by using the TWR name reading concept and resources, we were able to engage everyone at our high school and encourage them to think about genocide in a capacity that was much more meaningful and empowering than just history class. Now, this is not to throw shade on history teachers or history classes. History was my favorite subject, and it's really where a lot of this passion was born. But I think what the student is expressing is this desire and yearning to go beyond the classroom, to transform education and learning into action, to engage students all across their high school. And especially in the wake of what we've seen happen in Parkland and elsewhere, we are seeing high school students really step up now. And Together Remember is a powerful vehicle to do that in a way that goes beyond just one group. It kind of universalizes it and brings us all together. So I wanted to share that sort of thought from the student. I also, not to brag too much, but our communities have really responded positively to our engagement thus far. First off, of those that responded to our survey, 100% said they would recommend Together We Remember. And the vast majority, over 90%, said the level of support that we provided was great. And some said it was a little too much, and we'd rather be on the side of too much than not enough. So I think that's about right. And then the vast majority, also around 90%, said that they would be welcome. They would love to do another Together Remember Vigil. And the orange there is for the maybes, and we're following up with them too. So again, we all think that's really positive. So now I'd love to shift over to examples of some of our Together Remember Vigils to really help spark the imagination. A few examples before I turn it over to Jeannie. First off, in Crockett High School in Texas, what I loved about what an educator did there was that she designed a vigil that would work in the length of a classroom period. It was very much following that the vigil lesson plan. And she did it in 6 different periods. But what was so cool is you could see it, the whole process of education and remembrance turn into the action by the end of just one school period, right? So you had the intro video, the key terms, the historical context, the storytelling to really put a face to the history, the commemoration, and then the students took action. They used the student pledge sheets. They called and tweeted their elected leader for a piece of legislation. They also wrote postcards. So that was really cool to see in 6 different periods. Then in Brooklyn, at Brooklyn Technical High School, the students organized a 2-hour vigil after school. It didn't cost any money. They screened the video. They recruited an expert speaker on genocide from New York to come and speak. They did the pledges. They actually did a fundraiser for victims of the genocide against the Rohingya as well. Then in Illinois at Deerfield High School, what was so fascinating about this all-day event is that the students in advance created a pop-up museum exhibition about modern-day hate, which was really incredible. And then in John Carroll High School, they also did a full day-long vigil project. And what was unique about their approach is that they reserved a special large classroom in which students and different classes would visit all day long at different times. And then students would reserve 30-minute blocks with their classes to create their own programming. So the Spanish class focused on issues that had happened in Argentina. And similar things like that played out throughout the day with name reading, poetry, stories. And then in that case, city leaders and state leadership from across Maryland actually came to that vigil and got to connect with the students, which was really exciting and powerful. So those are some of the initial examples, but now I'm really excited to turn it over to Jeannie to talk a little bit more about what she was able to do in her first year organizing a Together Remember Vigil at Goretti High School in Maryland. So over to you, Jeannie. You're on mute right now, so I can't hear you just yet.
There we go.
Yep, we got you. Go for it.
Okay. So David asked me last week to think about what we did and what worked and what didn't work and what we think we might do in the future. So I wanted to piggyback on his ideas. I would suggest finding partners. And one of the easiest ways to do that is to ask parents who they know. You can certainly cold call the Chamber of Commerce or the Interfaith Council, but you'll generally get better buy-in if you know somebody. If you have a man or a woman who's on the inside, they can help you connect with groups that might be interested in partnering with you. I would say most adults are pretty impressed when you take some teenagers to talk about something and the teenagers speak eloquently about a cause. So take your most dedicated students and let them share the message with the grown-ups in the room. It's a good learning experience for the kids, but I'm sure you already know that. We really here at St. Maria Goretti as a Catholic school wanted to make it relevant to our students. We took students to the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C., and all of our history classes engaged in research projects. They researched genocides from around the world and special topics in the Holocaust itself. They produced some trifold boards in the end, and that helped us create kind of what David was talking about with a pop-up museum. And it made it more meaningful, I think, for the kids who were reading names because they knew something about the genocides. They had already looked at what had happened in the places. So as they read a name from Bangladesh, they had an idea of what had happened there. The other thing that we did, we partnered with the Jewish Council in Baltimore, and they were able to help us Skype with a Holocaust survivor. She had been in Auschwitz as an 11-year-old, and the kids got to hear her story about hiding and about eventually ending up in the camp and being part of the last selection before the camp was dismantled. And that experience meant that when they came into the Vigil and saw projects on Auschwitz and heard names that were being read from the Holocaust, they had more interest, more connection to what we were talking about. We decided early on that we wanted to keep the kids busy. So that's part of why you see in the pictures a bunch of craft activities. We wanted to give them a chance to feel like they were producing something. And so they also decided they wanted to have something tangible to represent each of the names that we read. So they had been inspired. They watched the Paperclip movie, and they decided that that was a very simple, inexpensive item that they could gather. So they added a paperclip to the chain for every name that was read, and they ended up with over 1,500 paperclips. They hooked it to the ceiling tiles, and it stretched back and forth across the cafeteria by the time they were done. One thing we thought about in advance when we looked at the app, it's so easy to use, the name reading app, but we had a feeling that our teenagers might have some difficulty with the foreign names, and it turned out to be true. There's really no way to preview which of the names they come up randomly, so the kids couldn't read them in advance and say, well, how do you think this is pronounced? So we decided that we needed to give them permission to just be wrong. We talked to them in advance and said, you know, these names are foreign. You're going to do the best that you can. But we did have one kid that got really self-conscious, and he started to giggle, and he kind of just dissolved, and he couldn't keep going. So we had the officers from our National Honor Society just waiting in the wings and keeping an eye on things. And one stepped up, took over, and the pair of kids just kept reading names. So that helped make it easier for them to know that it was okay, that they might not get it perfect, but that their heart was in the right place. In that same vein, we wanted to take a little stress off of the kids. So we decided to break up the name reading. As a Catholic school, we have kids that are very comfortable reading prayers, especially Christian prayers, but we included prayers from other faith traditions. And we included a bunch of readings that were quotes from Elie Wiesel and Pope Francis, and some poetry from around the world. Our choir came in at one point and they sang a song, or maybe two, I think, and that kind of helped re-energize the group as their energy was flagging towards the end of the event. So that broke it up. They would read names for about 10 minutes, and then we would have a little reading, and a new group of kids would come up, and that gave them a chance to participate without it being forever. And I would say use David as a resource as much as possible. We decided to keep things pretty small the first year. We didn't advertise publicly. We had our Rotary Club, a couple of members came in, and our students and staff and a couple of faith members did come in. But we had really hoped to have a big spring event out in the courtyard on a beautiful day. And we ended up having to be pretty flexible. We were in the cafeteria because it was a rainy day. So, you know, dream big, but take stock of your partners, consider your community, and do what works for you. David's very supportive, and when you feel like things aren't working, he's a pretty good cheerleader. Call him and he'll brainstorm with you and make it work. Make it something that's meaningful to your students. And that's pretty much all I have.
Thank you so much, Jeannie. It's just, I'm having flashbacks when we were having some of those phone calls and you were like, well, I don't know if it's going to work this way. I'm like, just keep going, you'll figure it out. And that honestly comes straight from my grandfather, who told me literally right outside of the gates of the camp, you know, don't lose hope. There's always a way. And so when folks tell me, oh, I don't know, there's some barrier. And this happened even at Duke when, you know, it was the day before our first Vigil event, and someone emailed me from the administration and said, sorry, you can't hold your event. You're not allowed to have amplified sound. Well, I emailed the most powerful person I knew on the campus, and he wrote an email back to me, and it just said, not a problem anymore, period. So, you know, there's always a way. You just got to be persistent. And that's what, you know, we're here to help. And I have my partner in action, also Kiel Majewski. We have the ADL team as well to help. So, you know, we're really excited to see this take a new and different form in every single community. And honestly, the social media piece is kind of selfish because I just want to see what's happening everywhere. Everyone does such different stuff. You know, the paperclip idea that y'all came up with, totally new and nothing that we ever had seen happen. And now that's one more idea that's available to every other school that's doing an indoor event that might have been rained out. So that's wonderful. Thank you so much. Now, Before we turn over to just open floor Q&A, I just wanted to remind folks that if you're really interested in signing up, all you have to do is go over to I'm going to jump over to a slide actually, this one. If you're ready to sign up, you just go to the Together We Remember website, which is togetherremember.org, and right on the homepage, or if you click once or twice, you can see our sign up page. You also can email me if you have additional questions. Happy to chat anytime. David@togetherweremember.org. And so now happy to open it up to questions.
And everyone, please remember that you have been automatically muted. So if you're trying to talk, unmute yourself, or you can also use the chat function and type your questions into the chat box.
Did anything come up in the chat box as of yet?
No, not yet.
Okay.
Hi, my name's Andrea Schwab. I'm from Donna Klein Jewish Academy. This is my first year teaching and first year running ADL at my school. My school is very excited. We're trying to gather more information so that we can propose this to the higher ups and everything. But I know a large portion of my organization does participate in the March of the Living, which is, I think, around the same time that this vigil should be taking place. So I'm expecting to lose about 60% of my club to that event alone. Would you recommend, I know you said to reach out to other like student bodies within the school, but I guess what size or how many students do you think we should like at least have? I know we should always aim for more to participate, but if we had like a minimum number, what has been effective and what hasn't really been effective?
Yeah, so what's great about where Andy is at is that I went to Donna Klein Jewish Academy. So I definitely know the community quite well. And really, this is like the first decision point you'll have is, are we going to do stuff are we going to do it at a scale of one classroom even, or are we going to do a school-wide event? And so my recommendation would be to go to, the key decision maker at the leadership level, the principal, or engage the students as well. Because if you have a compelling plan and a way to do it, it's really hard to say no to something like this. So, I think I know Donna Klein well enough that I could tell you that a school-wide program, school-wide assembly, with a combination of classroom-based activities leading up to perhaps a culminating event in the indoors or outside would work quite well. And given that Florida, at least Boca Raton, has a lot of resources related to this, survivors, my grandma would certainly come. There's a lot that we can do. And I think your intuition is right to, think about the March of the Living, but also in Boca, there's the Boca Raton Interfaith Clergy Association. We also have a larger vigil that we're going to be organizing in the city of Boca with city leaders. So it's possible that the students can do some activities in their classroom, generate some artwork, and then come and present that work at the culminating event. So a variety of ideas. The key task for us is to, as quickly as possible, just vet those ideas, see what's the most practical. My spirit is to aim for the stars and land on the moon. So quickly rein me in if it gets a little too wild, but I feel really confident in our ability at DKJA to do, a wide variety of really great programs. And building on what already exists, I think that's a big component of what we want to do as well, not to reinvent anything. Cool.
David, maybe it might help to know a little bit about our numbers. We have a pretty small school, about 220, and we combined our National Honor Society and our Rotary Interact Club, and altogether our core group had about 35 members who were participating in the vigil. We did invite the religion classes to come and visit, but it was really just that 30 group of kids that participated in the readings and said the prayers. And it worked for us, and we scheduled it on a day that they didn't have sports and we didn't have to worry about kids who were going off to play practice or what have you. So we scheduled it when it worked for us.
Yeah, and I would note on top of that in Jeannie's case, they originally tried to organize something in April. It didn't work out. It ended up in May, and that was totally okay, right? Ideally, we're going to have as many schools working with us in the month of April because that's when we're going to have folks all over the world. But if you said, hey, can we do our vigil in May or in March just because it's testing time or, it's a challenging time for us, we can do it. We'll make it happen. It's a huge win for us no matter what, and for the community. So we prioritize the community's needs first. but great question. Thank you.
And for our No Place for Hate schools, by the way, I know we say in our activities we should engage the whole student body. It is more than okay to, as Jeannie was just talking about, have your active participants be a core group and open that up to the rest of the student body to visit throughout the day. And have that core group be, lead the planning and the actual execution of the event. But all that pre-work that you're doing, whether it's that you're using Together We Remember materials like the survivor stories or the conflict summaries or the ADL escalation of hate, all that pre-work, you can actually touch your whole student body with that in your classrooms. And in that way, the active learning piece is still impacting the whole student body, even though the actual vigil is being done by a core group, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, thank you. This helps a lot. Thank you.
Yeah. Another fun little idea that I love for schools that have morning announcements is you could turn the morning announcements era or period into a vigil in itself, right? A name reading or a storytelling opportunity. And then technically you've engaged every student in the school and every staff member of the school. And you don't know what's going to happen when you do that. It's a really powerful opportunity. Even just for a few minutes. So, there's things like that are quite easy, that don't require much organizing, that are automatic wins, that are easy as part of like architecting a day of remembrance one way or the other. Any other questions coming to mind or thoughts from folks on the call? I'm training myself to count to 5 slowly because I hate moments of silence. I just have to fill it, But a lot of this work is about creating space for other voices, so.
Just take it to mean you are a very excellent presenter and you impart a lot of wisdom.
Thank you. Awesome. Well, what's exciting is if we don't have other questions, we can end a few minutes early and it becomes an all the more exciting webinar, a hard-hitting webinar for folks to watch and share later. So it looks like we have come up on our full agenda. So I'm just going to go back to the slide that shows the information in case you need it one more time. So the website is togetherweremember.org. My email is david@togetherweremember.org, and you can reach out to myself or to Katarina for anything related to No Place for Hate. As a reminder, this activity would count as one of the activities to make your school quote unquote no place for hate, which is awesome. So we hope to see as many No Place for Hate aspiring and current schools participate with us all across the country, as well as folks in other middle schools, high schools, universities, faith communities, you name it. If you have a space and you're a person, we want to work with you. So yeah, I think with that we can close it down.
Great. Thank you so much, everyone. And thank you so much, David, for taking this time to present to our schools. I know this is going to be very helpful. And please, for those of you that would like any follow-up, you can, when it comes to the No Place for Hate side of things, please feel free to reach out to your ADL regional staff as you work with them, or reach out to myself as well. And we hope to see you involved come April, and we're excited to see all your activities using that hashtag Together We Remember. So thanks, everyone, and more to come.
Thanks, guys. All right, bye.
Bye.